Welcome to this beautiful, impactful, wide-ranging conversation with Stephanie Carl. Stephanie is a nearly 30-year military veteran, and we talk about how mindfulness can quite literally be a lifesaver. We met through an organization called Mission Flexible, which supports veterans through mindfulness practices. I guided breathwork and mindful archery for a group of veterans on a few occasions through this organization, and that's how I met Stephanie. And also my friend Brandon. Earlier in the podcast, I did a conversation with Brandon about the therapeutic healing value of psychedelics for veterans. It's a really powerful conversation. And if that sounds outrageous to you, all the more reason to give it a listen. This conversation with Stephanie, again, wide-ranging, impactful about being a woman in the military, misconceptions around the military, and perhaps one of the most profound takeaways that we get into towards the end of the conversation is around the power of thinking globally while acting locally, how you can make a really great impact on the world around you by starting with yourself and those in front of you. Hope you enjoy it, and reach out anytime if you have thoughts, questions, reflections on the conversations. And I look forward to growing these conversations and this movement of unification through mindful living. Practical mindfulness that meets you where you are. This is Mindfulness Unscripted. I'm John Orsini.
There's the idea of disassociation, but for me, it was always nature. Nature was always a constant. And so when you have those moments where you can't imagine things getting any worse, being able to look at the sunrise or the sunset or a flower and recognizing that that's a beauty that's always going to be there. That natural grounding for me started at a very, very early age. And I guess that has been what I've always drawn back on whenever I've had tough times. The sunrise is my favorite part of the day. I like to be awake to see the sunrise. I absolutely love it because that's just that reminder of yesterday might have really sucked, but today's a new day and I get to start it with a beautiful sunrise.
And you have a military background, so you're probably used to sunrises too, getting up early, right?
Yeah.
So-
So it's funny, basic training, we're doing ruck marches and that was where walking meditations really started for me because you're out there, you're not allowed to really talk. Um and so you're carrying your ruck and your weapon and you're just walking for miles. And it's the one time during basic training I remember being able to just let my mind kind of wander, and watch the sun coming up over the trees and really be able to let myself go and process the things that you're going through in that moment um as you're really evolving. you know Basic training, they're breaking you down to rebuild you as what they need. um but I think there's a component of how do you hold on to self through that, and those ruck marches and that time out in nature with quiet, that gave me the time to do that.
Beautiful. And we've done a few breathwork sessions together now, and we had talked about just recently, had talked about this seat of the observer
Yeah.
and how in some ways, as we were talking about it, but in some ways I perceive all this mindfulness stuff as creating a bit of space, right? That I mentioned that quote between stimulus and response, there's a space.
Yeah.
In that space lies our choice and our freedom. And that I find, like you're mentioning with these rucks, I am personally not a veteran, so I don't have that personal experience that you're mentioning. But as a kind of a parallel with as I got into distance running, I
Yeah.
bought a book by a monk who was a distance runner. So it's called Running with the Mind of Meditation. And so it was that sense of just being engaged with this just repetitive, bilateral stimulation activity of just one foot in front of the other, one foot in front of the other. And when it
Yeah.
starts to get hard, when it starts to get difficult, rather than getting swept up in it, actually developing that seat of the observer to just observe, oh, I feel uncomfortable right now, or oh, I'm really in this and energized right now. And whatever the feeling is, that developing that ability to just observe it helps
Right.
create that little bit of space so that we're not like stuck in the cycle of our thoughts. The thoughts are still there, right? Which I think can be
Mhm.
a misconception, right? The thoughts are still there. It's not,
Yeah.
but that we can observe them and just create a little space around it. So that's
Yeah.
very interesting.
No, I think that's it's so relatable, related to that idea. Things like cold soaks. Um, I think any kind of discomfort. There's a book by, I think it's Stephen Magnus, Do Hard Things, and in that book he talks about people climbing Mount Everest and the challenges that you face in those type of environments when you're training. And I think so often we just want to give up, whenever things get hard, whether that is in a physical challenge or in an emotional challenge, whatever the case may be. Especially these days, you look at divorce rates, you look at, the number of single parent households, you look at how few people are pushing themselves from a physical realm. It's easier to just say, "That's hard, I can't do it," versus, "It's hard, maybe I can't do it today.
Mm,
Maybe I can't do it right now." And so being able to take that step back from it, and to your point, find that space that says, "This is hard. Okay, it's hard.
mhm.
Yep, but I'm still gonna try."
Right. Just keep one foot in front of the other, literally, metaphorically, as the case may be.
Yeah.
I love that you mentioned the emotional and the physical and how they support each other, right? Like it's a sort of what's the word, a proxy or like a
Oh, yeah.
like a simulation for the physical thing. And then in that it doesn't have to be, I love what you said too, that it doesn't always have to be to that point, like the perfect biohacking morning routine.
Right.
Has to be your willingness to sit with a bit of discomfort. Because if you're willing to do that in an intelligent way, in a thoughtful way physically, then it translates to the emotional capacity to be stronger in your relationship, to be able to assess the difference of, okay, this is a relationship I need to get out of, for all good reasons, versus is a relationship that we're having a struggle, but we need to learn how to just communicate with each other better because there's love here, and to be able to sit with discomfort. That's what all this stuff is about when you come at it from this mindfulness
Right.
perspective. So, with all that in mind, I would love to like open the door in whatever way you would like to speak about it, what it's like to be a woman in the military.
Ooh.
Yeah. I know, that's a big one.
That's a big one.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Uh, so I'll share my shirt first, because that's
Okay.
certainly, uh, well-behaved women rarely make history.
Mm,
Um, I have always been a huge fan of strong women, um, and I have also been very stubborn my entire life. Um, so being a woman in the military, it's been hard. I talk about do hard things. There are times that was really hard. Um, but sometimes I think we made it harder on ourselves. And I don't know that a lot of people necessarily recognize that, because if we want to be successful in the military, or those of us who want to be successful, or have a certain idea of what success in the military looks like, we tend to feel the need to push a little bit further, to go a little bit harder, right? So passing the fitness test was never good enough. It's always, I have to excel on the fitness test. Um, i- when the weight I'm carrying is probably a little bit more than what I should be carrying for my size and my frame, I I don't want help with it. I can do this on my own, because you don't want to be seen as the weaker individual. Or I'm going to be the first one to volunteer to pull the 24-hour shift because I don't want someone to say I'm not pulling my weight. But we do that to ourselves a lot of times. I don't necessarily, were there times I was around individuals who initially probably thought less of me because of their past experiences with other women? Absolutely. Um, but I think I ultimately was able to prove myself as just as capable. What I did learn though, man, that family of the military, that family bond, that is huge. I spent a lot of time. So my first, mm, probably about my first 10 years in the Army, for the most part, was spent within combat arms organizations. So working around infantry units. And so I did 3 tours in Afghanistan, and I would go out on missions with infantry soldiers. And there were times I'd be the only female there, and you figure it out. But what you find is that those male soldiers, they tend to kind of bond around you, to protect you in most cases. Um, it's letting yourself become part of the team instead of separating yourself from that team. And
Mm.
and I always took a different mentality with it because being public affairs, I wasn't like the medics, right? They had to have a medic out there with them. They didn't have to have a public affairs person with them. And so if they were taking me out with them, I had to recognize that I was taking a seat from someone that they would have brought that had a different skill set. And that meant I had to pull my weight and I had to make sure I wasn't a distraction to them. Because when you're in a combat zone, a distraction can mean death.
Mm. And in public affairs, how does that translate? Like when you go out versus when you stay on base, would that be?
Yeah, yep. So I would go out on missions with them. My we say that our primary weapon is our camera. We still carry a a rifle or a pistol depending on what type of unit we're in and what position we're in. Um, but there are a lot of times that instead of picking up our rifle to point and shoot, we're picking up our camera to point and shoot. And you have to be judicious in knowing when is it time to do one or the other.
Mm. And what is the in the camera, like what specifically are you looking for or taking pictures of, or what might prompt that?
So I've covered a variety of missions. My first deployment, I would go out. This was 2004, 2005, so it was a different environment back then. I really look back on some of the things we did in the early days of the global war on terrorism, and I look at policy now and procedures now, and I'm like, man, we never would have done that today under today's rules. Um, but I would just get on a helicopter and I would fly to a location and show up at a unit's headquarters and say, "Hey, I'm here to cover your unit for a few days or a few weeks." And not necessarily have any coordination in place and hope they could find a place for me to sleep and that they would let me go out on missions. And so I would go on foot patrols or I would go on mounted patrols with them, and my job was to tell their story so that their family members back home knew what they were doing. Um, then fast forward as I moved up in rank and I changed positions and I changed units, I ended up with an aviation unit. I would fly with the medevac, and I would write stories about our medevac soldiers and what they were doing because we had a very tough year in Afghanistan with a lot of casualties. The year I was out there with the aviation unit, and so that would be part of my mission with them. And then my next deployment, I was with a division headquarters, and so the only time I really went out with my camera, my primary focus was on investigations. It was looking at incidents of alleged civilian casualties and incidents where we had had our installations attacked, and trying to figure out, do the documentation to help figure out what caused this and how do we prevent it from happening again. And then in that deployment, I also oversaw a lot of other soldiers who were responsible for going out to capture that type of information and imagery that I was capturing on my first two deployments. So kind of coaching them through that process and what we were looking for from them for the stories that we were trying to tell.
That's incredible. So just to show you how, naive or ignorant or whatever I am, I didn't realize that the military had an aspect like that. And so this is like loading me with, I have a lot of curiosity and questions around this because a first thing is before I became, I spent the whole first portion of my adult life and career as an actor in the entertainment industry.
Right.
Before I did that, I wanted to be a journalist. That was like, so I learned how to, I was in the dark room in high school. Like I was really interested in photography
Yeah.
because I wanted to get into journalism. And what I wanted to do was run through war zones with a camera and send information back home to be like, hey, this is going on over here.
Yeah.
So to know that there's a built-in thing in the military, again, I just totally ignorant on my part. I didn't know that that was a piece of the military, not just journalism outside of it.
So I actually didn't either when I first went to join, and I had a similar goal to yours. So I remember being a kid watching Desert Storm. Desert Storm was the first war where we had 24-hour news cycle, and CNN was on the ground reporting daily, and I was fascinated. And I said, that's what I want to do. I want to be a combat correspondent. And I'm a very pragmatic thinker. And so I looked at that and I was like, well, how do you get to become a combat correspondent? Well, you probably have to know something about war. Well, how do you learn about war? Well, I should probably join the military. So, but my grandfather and my father had both served in the army. And so for me, that was a natural, I never considered any other branch of service. And I had a wonderful recruiter. I still talk to him to this day. And he's the one who actually opened my eyes to the fact that journalism in the army was a thing. And so I joined the army to be a journalist. I within my first 3 years, I was a newspaper editor. I worked on a magazine staff. Absolutely loved it. I've received awards for my writing. And then we kind of go through a lot of transitions as we promote and as we move through different things. So it became more public relations focused for me as I progressed. A lot more emphasis on strategic communications, but I still appreciate. In fact, I just got a new camera kit. I still appreciate the a picture's worth a thousand words.
Mm. That's incredible. Yeah, I remember there was 2 things I was inspired by, all related to all this, and now all the more so than this conversation with you. Um, so there was a movie, it was James Woods, Salvador, 1986. Salvador, James Woods, a burnt out photojournalist, directed by Oliver Stone.
Oh,
Um
I'll have to watch that one.
Yeah, so I don't even like now I don't remember the movie well. I just remember when I saw it, I was like, that's something, right? And then so between that and then getting to know the work of Sebastian Younger,
Oh, I've gotten to do I did some work with Sebastian Younger when I was with the Aviation Brigade.
that's incredible. What was that like?
So it was really an immersive experience because I had just arrived to the unit, and unit had been deployed previously. We were getting ready for another deployment. Um, and he was working um, on his book. And
Tribe or was it
no, oh man, it was focused on the Korengal Valley. And so my aviation brigade had been the medevac support when the soldiers in the Korengal Valley got attacked. And so I facilitated the interviews with the pilots, and with some of the soldiers who had been on the ground there. And at this point in time, it had been almost 10 years since I deployed to Afghanistan, and we were getting ready for another deployment. And I was deploying with a lot of people who had just come back from another deployment to Afghanistan, and it was that deployment with the Korangal.
Mm.
And I think I'd only been in the unit maybe a month. And those were some hard, hard interviews to facilitate, um, because our soldiers really do, they take their responsibilities seriously. And um, yeah, it was hard. It was definitely a it, it certainly set the tone for where my focus needed to be going into our deployment that we were getting ready to go on.
Mm. There's Restrepo is a documentary,
That's
right? The
yeah.
Portugal. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So he did Restrepo, and then he and
Tim Hetherington.
Tim Hetherington they produced the book together after Restrepo.
Mm. Yeah, I'm seeing here. So obviously, one of the early ones that probably most people might recognize was The Perfect Storm because they made the movie out of it.
Yeah.
And then there's Tribe. There's one called War.
War. That's
War.
the one. It
Yep.
was War.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And then there's one here called Freedom, which I don't know that one. I know Tribe, and then he wrote a new one because he had a near or In My Time of Dying.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's incredible that you have that point of contact, that reference, and thank you for sharing that and about that because this is the thing I can't imagine. I can't imagine. And then having seen read a couple of his books and then having seen that documentary Restrepo with Tim Hetherington, right? That you just mentioned here. Um and then Tim was killed on
Yeah.
assignment, right?
Yep.
Yeah, horrible. But to speak to the work that they were doing and the work that you've been doing, really being there,
Yeah.
right? Not just like standing out on the sidelines, which is also, I mean, there's heroic levels to everything. I'm not disparaging anybody or anything, but
Yeah.
really being in there, like you said, am I pulling the gun or the camera right now? Right? Like,
Yeah.
what do I need to do to make sure I can get home safely today and to the people next to me? Right? And
Yeah.
that's, yeah.
And I think so. I was fortunate. I was very fortunate on my deployments. There was really only one time I ever faced where it was, do I need to raise the gun?
Mm,
Um, but I look at some of my friends. I've had soldiers killed, um, and the reporters I've worked with. Anya Niedringhaus is another one that I had the opportunity to work with, who then later died on assignment. And that's that's such a crazy spiral of thoughts that can happen too. You talk to people who, I was supposed to be on this mission, or I was just here, and then my friend was killed in this same area. Um, there's so many aspects to it, but I still wouldn't trade it for anything.
mm.
I Because to your point, it's you're doing such important work.
Yeah. Yeah, and if people don't know, like that was I think a big part of it was when I was in high school. I'm trying to think. I think I was a junior in high school when 9/11
Mhm.
happened. So then of course after that there was all this stuff about even though a fair amount of it was confusion or then around what was what and who was who and whatever else and but there was a lot of talk after that, after 9/11, of people, like a huge push of people to join the military at that time in particular, and the war on terror and all these things, right? And the idea, the main point, the reason I'm sharing that is because after 9/11 and subsequent years, it was like, whoa, there's always, unfortunately, I think, and you know this way better than I do, there's always conflict going on in places all over the world always, and it's just a question of how much is it ramping up, And so my awareness came around that time because the conflict was ramping up significantly. And yet, whereas you mentioned the war being on TV 24/7, Desert Storm, or people talk about Vietnam or World War II,
Mm.
like the collective American culture was more aware that there was a massive conflict going on.
Right.
And, in some cases there was support, in some cases like Vietnam especially, there was protests against. But the point is the culture was very dialed into the fact that there was a massive conflict going on, and we either needed to be victorious to overcome, like in World War II, for instance, like this inherent evil, or in Vietnam, there's collective feeling of like, it's time to get out of here. But the point is that people were aware more so.
Right.
I felt like in my generation, at least, like, being where I'm like, my friends aren't thinking about this. My friends aren't really talking about this. I have a couple friends that are in the military, and very proud of them. But for the most part, where and how I grew up, it was like it wasn't even happening, is my point. And that's not okay, right? That's not okay. Whether you agree or disagree with something, we need to know as best we can what's happening. And it's people like yourself that help us be in tune with, like you mentioned, the family. So either the heroic, the beautiful stories, the life affirming stories to share, and then on the other end of that, like, what was this over here? Is that needful? Is that what is going on over here? Can we get out of that? Like, are we just what's happening over there? And the point is, we need the information, and it's people like yourself that bring it to the table, like you said, such important work. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it also, I'm going to bring us back to mindfulness. I think you know, I watched the military go through such a shift after 9/11, moving more toward embracing mindfulness as a practice,
Mm.
and incorporating it into the resilience in general, things like that. So I did my first sergeant time. I was with a warrior transition unit, and that was where I really first got introduced. So after those two tours, those two back-to-back tours to Afghanistan, I shifted to that warrior transition unit. And that's where we send our wounded, ill, and injured soldiers to recover and either return to service or transition out of the military if they're not able to recover adequately to continue service. And during that time was also when I started going to therapy, because those two deployments were really tough on me. I lost some friends. I had to do some stuff that at times was, um, you talk about moral injury. That was something that I experienced in some of my responsibilities, because what we believe to be right as a human can sometimes be in conflict with what we have to do in combat. War is not pretty. Um, and so going through therapy, but also being in the transition unit at the time as a leader, that meld between the focus on the physical healing combined with the mental and emotional healing. We had yoga practice incorporated into some of our physical activities for our wounded soldiers. So once a week, I would do yoga with my soldiers. Um, that was also the first time I was encouraged to meditate. And I got to tell you, it was disastrous.
In what way?
I couldn't do it. I could not do it. I had this therapist who said, "Let's try some meditation. You're just gonna sit here and breathe." And I got about 30 seconds in. I said, "I can't do this." He's like, "Well, what's wrong?" I said, "Well, the air conditioner is dripping outside. I hear doors down the hallway. There's all these other things happening. No, I can't. How am I supposed to focus on my thoughts?" Now I realize I'm not necessarily supposed to focus on my thoughts. I'm
Oh yeah.
supposed to just let the thoughts come and go.
Hmm. Right? There's so many different ways, and I appreciate you mentioning that, and also too, I wanna say, around military thing, very often what'll come up, I think less and less so as more people maybe even need to come to something, um, right? Like when we come to a point of change, or whether it's from anxiety or whatever the things, like I'll try, you know what? I don't care if been a skeptic before, I'll try anything, right? Like sometimes,
Yes.
so but I think there's less and less skeptics, but all to say around the pragmatism of mindfulness, very often, like I've said before in clients and like different spaces, if breath work didn't work, why would they teach it to snipers?
Yes.
And that's extreme, right? But we're talking about the military. We're talking about literal life or death. We're talking about this has to work. Like
Right.
we can't spend time in like ethereal la la land, right?
Right.
And some people want to categorize mindfulness in general as that, or be like, no, just give me a pill because that's the only thing that's going to work. It's like, well, if these things didn't work, they wouldn't use them ubiquitously. Is that the word? Ubiquitously in the military, right? So it's not just like, oh, here's a way to like relax on a spa weekend. It's like, here's how to actually make my life more coherent, and how to, help me process things that are really significant.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you mentioning
Absolutely.
that. Thank
Yeah, and you did the archery session with us,
you.
and that really I've told you before, I have a tendency to do that correlation between my military experience and then the different practices that I'm incorporating. And so that's where my mind went as you were taking us through the archery,
Mhm.
was here's here's where my breath work needs to be focused and why and what I get from it. Well, wait a minute. This is the same thing I learned in basic marksmanship almost 30 years ago.
Mhm.
Um, and so I think that has really helped me adopt the practice more in the last few years, is really thinking back on, I've been using this for decades. Um, and it was there for the same reason. I think part of it is how we teach it. We teach it as focused on marksmanship, but imagine if we maybe changed how we teach it and say, hey, this is a tool for your marksmanship, but it's a tool in your day-to-day life too.
Yeah. It's context, right? That the thing's the same, but the context,
Right.
how you understand the implications, right?
Right.
It's like we're saying challenging yourself physically. Once you recognize the implication of how that could help you sustain discomfort emotionally,
Right.
and assess things more objectively, rather like more responsively rather than reactively. And I think, the practice is already there, like you're saying, like with the rucking, with the marksmanship. If in our lives, when the practice is already there, it's just our conceptual understanding of the
Right.
implications. All of a
Right.
sudden, the same practice opens the door to, oh my gosh, I have so much more engagement and connection to myself and others in my life
Right.
without even adding more. It's just about changing our understanding and relationship to those things.
Right.
That's cool. That's amazing. I love that. Um, so what's it look like now? Like, so you've had a pretty substantial military career, right? Like how long have you been in?
27 years.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you. I mean, a million times over. I mean, I'm sure you
Uh,
hear that and
yeah, John, it's an honor to serve. That's what I always tell people when they say thank you for your service. It's an honor. It really is.
mm,
Um, I don't want to be a combat correspondent. I I think I got that out of my system. I've started, really since my work with Mission Flexible, I have started writing again, which
mm,
I love. So I actually just last month started a newsletter on Substack. So Worm Wisdom is what I call it. I am overdue for my second installment, but the idea behind it is really looking at, life is full of worms. What prompted it? So when I'm having a bad day, that like song from being a kid where it's like, nobody likes me, everybody hates me. I guess I'll go eat worms.
okay, yeah.
Yeah. So when I'm having a bad day, that's what runs through my head. Either that or the Toys R Us song
Hmm.
are the two. Those are my two earworms at the time. And so looking at how life is full of these worms, and some days the worm could be, I left my car window down and it rained. or it could be, like right now, government shutdown. Are we going to get paid? you know, things. So your worm, the size of your worm, and the seriousness of the worm can change from moment to moment. But in that, there's always that glimmer, and that glimmer can be the sunrise that's going to come up. It can be, for me, it's my dog Logan sometimes who's going to greet me at the door with his toy and his tail wagging, because the worst thing that happens in his life is he doesn't get the treat that he wants. Um, y- you know, if we can see those glimmers more than we focus on the worms and remember what we've got the ability to control and need to let go of, that's, I think, true resilience. And so that's the focus of worm wisdom is here's all the bad things that have happened that I can let myself get caught up on. And sometimes I do let myself get caught up in it. But here's the glimmer that gives me the resilience to push through it. Uh,
Incredible. Yeah. Yeah.
so the
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No, no, no. After you.
So there's that. And then I actually also just was presented with an opportunity to serve in a volunteer capacity with a veteran nonprofit called Beneath the Service. And so I'm finishing up my master's degree in industrial and organizational psychology right now. And Beneath the Service focuses on leadership development from a research based position for transitioning veterans, whether they transitioned 5 months ago or 15 years ago. And so that is some really meaningful work for me to be able to give back to that community, but also continue to progress in uh, my passion for industrial and organizational psychology.
That's incredible. And again, thank you. I mean, broken record here, but really, and I also feel weird because I know like different people have different feelings about being thanked and just like anything else in life, if it's just like, all right, enough or like or whatever, you know what I mean? But like really incredible work. Thank you. Yeah. Um, I was thinking about what you relating to what you said is about the worm concept. And I was thinking a lot about this just yesterday actually when I was driving up to Kripalu. So a couple things you mentioned, Mission Flexible, the veteran organization where we met with Lisa, and how we were in touch through Lisa, incredible organization. And then the relationship to Kripalu, where I guide and work, and how we feed mindful archery there. And so with all that in mind, as I was driving up to Kripalu just yesterday to guide a breathwork group up there and guide an archery session, I was thinking about this sense that how the mind doesn't perceive negatives, in the sense that if I were to say, "Don't think of an elephant," don't think of an elephant. Of course,
You think of an elephant.
your brain just hears elephant, right? Whereas if I say, "Do think of a tiger," right? Guess what you're not thinking of?
Right.
An elephant, right? So it's not about willfully or idealistically or delusionally ignoring negative things. That's definitely not it. But that when we focus on the direction we're headed, the other stuff tends to, again, it's not perfect. It's not like a perfect formula, but the idea is when we focus on where we're headed, the other things start to fall away in many
Right.
cases on their own. And it always makes me think of when I lived in New York City. There was this woman on with her child on the playground. I was doing the pull-ups over on like the workout station, and I can hear this toddler over on the playground side just like freaking out. And I could hear think with their caretaker, their mother, they seem like right. And she kept saying to the toddler, she said, she was like, "Thomas, tell me what you want, not what you don't want. Tell me what you want, not what you don't want." And I was like, that's how I need to talk to the toddler inside my own freaking head. Right? Like, tell me what you want, not what you
Right.
don't want. And that idea of moving towards, so I just love what you said there about all that. And so cool about the masters and everything. I'll be excited to hear more as that progresses. That's incredible.
Thanks. I'm almost done. I December I graduate. So I'm really
Fantastic.
excited.
That's incredible. And cool too about the organization. Tell me the name of the organization again that you mentioned.
It's called Beneath the Service.
Meet the service.
So it was founded by two veterans, a husband and wife. And they initially um, are focused. So there's two primary programs that the organization facilitates right now. One is a women veterans leadership program, and that is done in partnership with Virginia Tech. It's a roughly 5-month cohort that results in a leadership certification at the end of it. And that one is specifically for women. And the second one is called Reorient, and that one is open to any veteran. And it's really focused. That one's a shorter, it's only a couple of days, but that one is focused on really helping veterans to really change how they're looking at their transitions. So the idea of the transition after the transition, and recognizing we have this tendency when we're going through a transition out of the military to fixate on getting the right job that pays us the right amount or comes with the right status symbol or that is reflective of what we achieved in our military career. And I can't remember what the percentage is right now, but there's a really high percentage of veterans who actually don't stick with the first job that they get coming out of the military. Like within the first year, they've usually left that first job. And so the belief that a lot of that comes from we're motivated by the wrong things in looking for that career after the military. For myself, I made a conscious decision of I'm not going to jump into another job per se right out of the military because I have to refocus. I have to think about what matters to me. What are my priorities after 27 plus years of my priorities being driven by the military and whatever our mission was at the time? Well, who's Stephanie now? And what are Stephanie's priorities now? Um, and so that really resonates with me as I look at the work that Beneath the Service is doing is helping veterans. It's not about finding the purpose. A lot of people say you have to find your purpose after the military. I think personally, I believe most of us have that purpose already throughout our time in the military. It's how we apply ourselves toward that purpose that we have to figure out.
Mm, beautiful. Yeah, there's that book, Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor
Yeah.
Frankl.
Yeah.
And if we know our why,
Right.
right? We can deal with almost anyhow, that kind of feeling. And
Right.
that sense of purpose can be really tricky. And I would imagine, especially after a military career, which depending on how your career played out as an individual, there's I'm sure there's a level of camaraderie, right? You had mentioned a sense of camaraderie. I'm sure depending on, again, deployments, different things, a sense of intensity,
Right.
and which can be perceived as a negative thing, certainly in terms of traumatic events. But I would maybe guess, and definitely please correct me here. I would guess that there may be also the possibility of a level of intensity that contributes to the feeling of bonding, contributes to the feeling of purpose, contributes to the feeling of mission. Like we really did some good today, right? On a very high level.
Yeah.
And then so if all of a sudden you, say, come home and then maybe you're just, punching a clock at some place where maybe even everybody, like, ideal situation, everybody's perfectly nice, but there's
Right.
not really a sense of, like, maybe even if that sense of intensity of purpose isn't there, or that sense of camaraderie isn't there, because in the world outside, as we know, um, there's an epidemic of loneliness.
Right.
Right? Like, because there's, like, this fractured disconnection, so I'd imagine, so again, I'm kinda jumping all over the place a bit, but all kinda getting to the point of what's the transition of how the career feels in the military versus how the career feels after. I could imagine on many levels is a significant difference.
Yeah, I think one of the things I've really heard a lot about is the the fact that when you go to whatever your career is outside of the military, it's we're a family in the military. right? We know when each other's birthdays are. We know when anniversaries are. We know when someone's mom or dad is sick, when they've got a sick child, all of those things. Um, we, there are things that we do that are so out of the ordinary to the average person. Um,
Hmm.
I can reflect on times where someone has said, "Hey, my friend's coming through town. They need a place to stay. Can they crash with you?" I've never met them, but sure, if you're willing to vouch for them, they can absolutely stay with me. And that's just the way we operate. Or conversely, I I'm going through town. Does anyone know anyone here that I can stay with or that can give me a ride here? Those kinds of things, and we do it without a second thought. Hey, I'm deploying for 6 months. You don't have a car. Do you want to borrow my car? You just have to pay the insurance. That stuff is commonplace in the military. And then you go to the civilian sector where you punch a clock and I show up at 8 or 9 in the morning and I leave at 4 or 5 in the afternoon. And I might not ever learn your first name or I might not ever learn your last name, let alone the names of your kids and their ages. Maybe one or two people I work with, I'll have that connection, but not 12 of them like we have in the military.
Yeah. Yeah, there's and especially with the internet, different things, like I feel like there's a wider scope of connections, but
Right.
they're not as deep, right? Like,
Yeah.
and that's the thing. I almost think of it like if we're stuffing our face with food that has no nutritional value,
Right.
it's like you start to get really full,
Mhm.
but you're starving at the same time.
Right.
And I sometimes think of social interaction that way is like I think in some ways we're really stuffed. Like how many of us can relate to having it's just like how many text messages, how many Instagram messages, how many things, and it's like I'm so glad that there's communication going on, but it's email,
Right.
right? I'm so glad there's communication going on, and I'm so obviously deeply grateful for the people in my life, but it's just too much communication with not enough substance, and it's like a
Absolutely.
complete disparity, and so just as a parallel, maybe on some level.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. There's a book I read last year. Gosh, I'll have to send you the name of it. It's about a digital detox.
Mm.
So the woman who wrote it, she was raised Jewish, and so in the Jewish religion, they do a um, technology detox once a week.
Sad.
And so right. And so she wasn't really a practicing Jew, but she decided to incorporate this practice into her life and bring it to her family, where they detox everything. So no cell phones, no video games, no TV, no nothing. It's time to connect as a family. And when they were initially introducing it, there were people that were very skeptical, saying, "Oh, your kids are never going to go for this. You've got a teenager, blah, 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 blah." Well, the kids started to embrace it too. And they started to recognize like their anxiety went down, their connection to each other went up, their connection with others went up. And I did an inventory a couple of months ago, and I'm like, I've got Facebook, Instagram, X, Snapchat, um, regular messaging, iMessage. I have 5 different email addresses that I use, um, Telegram, Signal, WhatsApp. Like at some point, I have all of these places that I'm expected to go to receive information and
Yeah.
connection. But who has time to connect when at this point you're just monitoring? And there have been periods in time, and I've been saying for a few weeks now, I need to pick back up my own habit of once a week, my electronics get turned off.
Mhm.
Um, because it's easy to get sucked into, "Oh, I'm just going to start scrolling on
Yeah.
Instagram or TikTok."
Yeah.
And that's time that could be spent reading or
1000%.
playing cards with a friend.
This is a perfect example and actually brings me full circle. You mentioned nature at the beginning.
Yeah.
And the thing is, with all of this, there's so much information, and even saying something like in the connection to nature, right? But that it sounds like that was a lifeline, right? When you were
Right.
younger, you were saying when you were feeling difficult times like that, nature was a lifeline. And the thing is, nature is a lifeline by spending time in nature.
Right.
Nature is not a lifeline by thinking about how spending time in nature is good
Right.
for us. We all know that. And
Right.
so this may be a projection on my part, but I know as years go by as a facilitator of mindfulness and breath work, especially, um, what I run into are, and again, it may be a projection on my part, but I think that so many people now, which is great, are familiar with breathing patterns, are familiar with nature meditation, or just spending time in nature, period, are familiar with these things. It's like, right, but we're here to do it, right? Like, that's why we're here right now, to do it. So it's like, I feel like sometimes, again, probably projection, but very specific example. Like the other day, I had a workshop and I went to guide alternate nostril breathing, right?
Yeah.
Some
Yeah.
people know exactly what that is. Some people don't. I love to speak to the room to just like, because again, even if you've done something like that a million times, you know exactly what it is, come to it like you've never done it before. That is literally the practice where you'll get the most mileage out of it. To drop into something with beginner's mind every time is how we get the most out of it. To walk out into nature as if we've never seen a leaf changing color
Right.
before. Magic, awe, gratitude, all these things come flooding when we
Yeah.
see the thing, when we do the thing for the first time, even if it's like, although there's small side note, right? We never step in the same river twice, right? So even if you've had a sip of coffee every morning for the past, however many years, it's never been this sip, right?
Right.
The temperature's never been necessarily exactly that, or like the flavor profile is never actually, it's always the first time when you really get down to it. But point being, I feel like I was starting to guide alternate nostril breathing, and there was at least a few people in the room that I perceived as being like, oh, I know this one. You
There is
know?
something new.
Right? And so, but again, maybe probably a projection on my part, but one of my mentors at Kripalu, he's like, "John, it's a practice. You're not here." He's like, "I know where you're coming from, but you're not here to entertain people, right? You're not here to entertain people. You're here to guide a practice." And in fact, I'll say this one other thing about it. I once had this thought, and this may or may not be true, certainly probably not in all cases, but I think it's worth considering that we could have novelty or we could have progress,
Yeah.
but we don't necessarily have both,
Right.
right? And there's an argument obviously in there. I think that's not exactly always true. Like within novelty, there also can be progress for sure. And within progress, there could also certainly be novelty, but it just helped me delineate when something is new and exciting, it has a certain like way, a dopamine hit, whatever. But when something's like, I know this thing inside and out a million times over, but I'm going to keep going deeper with it. It's like, again, this is probably not exactly right, but it's like a dopamine hit versus a serotonin release,
Right.
right? It's that short burst versus like ooh, this is getting to my soul, right?
Yeah.
And so, anyway, that's the whole.
No, I love that. I think your reference to the chemistry behind it, that's so huge because I do think we have this tendency, especially in today's society, w- we want the dopamine hit because that's the familiar and that's what feels that instant gratification, right? That
Mhm.
that everyone's looking for today. But man, the peace that comes with the serotonin release is it, it's unequivocal.
Mhm.
I am learning as I'm getting older, and that's where that practice comes in. The knowing over time I am going to get the serotonin release that means I don't crave that dopamine hit because I'm now steady and constant, which is so much more calming, quite frankly. The chaos of the dopamine hit just yeah, I'll pass. I'll pass
Exactly.
on it.
And again, it's easy to get caught up into it, like we were saying, and we've all at this point have heard versions of this probably a million times, like, this, whether it comes from the scrolling or the panic in the news or like
Right.
whatever your hit of adrenaline or whatever that rub
Right.
is, that there's the deeper undercurrent, and we've all heard it a bunch. And just, I think the main thing now is recognizing, yes, all this information's at our fingertips, which is beautiful.
Yeah,
Practice.
sure. Yeah.
Micah Mortali, who runs the outdoor programs at
Yeah.
Kripalu, he has this sense that, when we go out in nature, whether we even know what meditation is or not, there's this inherent when we actually just go there, right? No phone, no anything like that. Just go and sit outside and look at stuff. It's like we naturally fall into this primal, like, natural state of mindfulness where we just notice the breeze in the leaves. We look at like, a leaf falls from the tree, and we look at the veins in the leaves. We touch tree bark. Like, there's a natural process that happens, down regulates the nervous system, and you don't have to learn anything. You don't have to think about anything or not think about anything. You just show up and know,
Right.
right?
Right.
How powerful, you know?
Absolutely.
So, I would love to, before we go here, I would love to ask this question. What are things about the military that you either consider like major misconceptions that you would want the world to know? Again, whether we talked a bit about your experience, your personal experience as a woman in the military, but what are things that are either misconceptions, things that you hear that come up in the news, like the military thinks this about this, or these broad stroke concepts? Like, what would you want the world to know that you feel like is a misunderstanding or a misconception?
So there are a few things I would say to that. So one is the military at its core is an apolitical organization. And I think a lot of people either don't know or forget or don't understand that the military follows orders. At the end of the day, it is we serve at the pleasure of the people and the president and the Congress. And so everything that we do as an organization, that's what it's rooted in. It- so I guess what I would say to that is the takeaway or the call to action for people is education and awareness, right? If you're seeing things or hearing things that you don't agree with, well, the military is doing what we're directed to do in different situations. Not everyone who's in the military always agrees with what we're directed to do either, but we've taken an oath to obey the orders that are given to us. And so when the American citizen disagrees with, they have a way to act upon that, and that's going to vote. And I think what I would say from a political lens, so many people focus on party lines, and our structure even is geared toward a focus on party lines, where the emphasis is you have to choose a party for your vote in the primaries to matter. Um, and what I would say is people need to educate themselves on the candidates, and people need to become more aware of how politics at your local level impact progressively at the higher level. Um, so if you're focused on who is being elected president, you're missing out on the most critical parts, because it's really more about who's your district representative. What decisions is your city council making? Because they're the ones that are tied in with your political leaders. Who's your governor? Um, it's easy to check the blocks and say, "Oh, I voted." But if all you voted for, all you educated yourself on was who was running for president, um, you're not going to see the changes you're looking to see, regardless of where your focus is for those changes. And then, from an information lens, as a journalistic background, I would say we're in a really scary place right now, where we are quick to make assumptions about people, and we're willing to say things online to complete strangers that we would never dream of saying to someone's face if they were standing in front of us and we'd never met them before. And to make assumptions about people that we interact with online that we've never met before, that we would never dream to assume about them if we met them face to face. Um, Having been in third world countries, having been in war torn countries, we are very lucky as Americans for the lives we get to live here. Um, but if we allow ourselves to devolve in our humanity and in our willingness to consider all sides of a conversation, then we are, I believe, potentially setting the conditions for our country to go the same places some of those other countries I've been in have gone. And
Mm,
that's not the country I want to live in. So I hope we can come together and unite as a country.
beautiful. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And it's so important to be said. And just candidly, I don't even know if I'll keep this in or not because, but candidly, on this podcast, in these conversations, like as I'm just sharing more things on, YouTube and stuff in general, Spotify and wherever, I am really wondering because I'm wondering like what the place is for when you need to speak out on an issue, right? Like to stay quiet on something is an injustice. And yet when speaking about something, here's the bullet point or the main point. When we are engaging with something where we're contributing to a divide in a
Right.
culture versus when we're engaging in something to contribute to a unification in our culture.
Right.
And so as many people as might be having these conversations, what you just shared, especially from your history in the military, which some people have like talk about my ignorance of not knowing about the degree to which journalism within the military, right? But
Yeah.
people's like ignorance about the military period, where maybe they just think it's this or just think it's that. And then the idea that you're saying, like, the whole structure, I don't need to repeat all the things you said, but just reflecting on all the things you said, which are so helpful, so informative. And then mentioning too about acting, like I often like to say, think globally, act locally.
Right.
So, like, I love your point about, like, getting involved, like, where are the people right around you? Like, if you're only focused on the president, it's like we're screaming into a void being like, "Why is no one listening?" Right?
Right.
It's like, "Okay, let's take some steps back." Right? Think globally, act locally. Again, I'll, like, joke about I learned that about recycling when I was in 3rd
Yeah.
grade, right? And then I realized, "Oh my gosh, that applies to everything." It
Right.
applies to, like, if I wanna see more unity globally, I need to be more unifying in my language,
Right.
right? I need to be more unifying in the comments I do or don't leave on a freaking social media page. Like, if
Right.
you think you want unity, it starts with your words and your behavior and your language. Like,
Right.
that's the main thing. And so I appreciate so much everything you just said. Thank
Yeah.
you for saying that.
I, and I think to your point, the think globally, but focus act locally. It's even when you look at homelessness, at food pantries, things like that. Um, there, so many people are willing to talk the talk, but what are you doing about it? How are you helping locally to impact where you can? We used to have a very philanthropic society, and I think somewhere along the way we got away from that. And I think maybe we're coming back into a time where I hope to see that pick up on a more local level. Doesn't have to be, we don't all have to be the Rockefellers,
Mhm.
right? To be able to make a difference. You can make a difference in one person's life.
Beautiful. Um, I would love to just be like, yes. And on that note, I need to add this one thing because I remember, and I wish I could give credit to the person who wrote it. Um, there was some article I read in the New York, I think it was the New Yorker. And it was basically about how activism used to be like, I'm going to show up for people who are right in front of me. Right.
Yeah.
And that's not to say there's not people out protesting, but even that has like multi tiers of people being like, there's paid protesters now.
Right.
There always were. I don't freaking know. Is that true? When is it true? Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Point is, I think everything you just said made me think about that article about how protests used to, or like about how activism used to mean showing up for people in front of you, and how some people or a lot of people now think of activism purely as showing up on their social media page. Which I'm not disparaging that; it's not nothing, but it's not helpful if there's not showing up to the person in front of you, right?
Right.
If it's not taking responsibility for your language and how you would behave in real life versus how you're going to behave on those platforms. Again, not disparaging anything. Everybody's gone finding their own way with stuff, but just the idea of like bring it back to the person in front of you, and then even more to the point, bring it back to yourself. Like if you
Right.
want to, I forgot where I heard this, but if you want to save the world, start by making your bed, right?
Yeah.
Okay, start here, start with your heart, start with these practices, going to nature, these different practices, and then start with the people in front of you after that.
Yep. I love that.
Thank you. So while we're here, anything else you want to share, ways to get in touch with you? You mentioned organizations that you're working with. Anything else
Yeah.
you want to share here?
I I mean, I think so. Warm Wisdom on Substack,
Mhm.
and I'm on LinkedIn. Stephanie.Carl. I think it's Stephanie.Carl1 is my handle on LinkedIn. Those are really my two primary places. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. Do I use them consistently? Debatable. I'm on Threads. They're all connected to each other now, so that's
Beautiful.
fun. Um, I love to talk about this stuff, and I love to um, really I love to see people and help people as they're finding the best versions of themselves, because my goal every day is to continue to work toward the best version of myself. I don't always get it right, but I sure try.
Mm. Practice makes progress. Like I
Not
know, forget
perfect.
perfect. Yeah, fuck that. you know. Uh,
Yes.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Stephanie. I really appreciate you
Oh,
taking the time and beautiful. It's been beautiful working with you in breathwork sessions and just getting to know you more. And thank you for everything that you do. I really appreciate it.
oh, you too, John. Thank you so much.
In person events, Zoom sessions, and more at johnorsini.com. I'll see you next time, and victory to the light within.